Picture this for a second. The Jedi are alive. The clones are standing right next to them. And Palpatine is sitting in his office, wondering why nobody followed through on his sinister little command. Suddenly, the galaxy feels completely different, because that one order, that one flick of a switch, is the thing that held the entire house of cards together. Without it, everything changes. And you cannot help but wonder if the so-called Chosen One still slides into darkness, or if history rewrites itself in ways we cannot even imagine. And that is the hook right there, because the Jedi were already wobbling on their pedestal like a tipsy bantha. You take away Order 66, and sure, they get to breathe for a moment, but do they actually fix anything? They still argue in circles, they still treat Anakin like the world's angriest intern, and they still refuse to see that their rules make them fragile instead of strong. Imagine being handed a second chance, and immediately fumbling it like Jar Jar at a state dinner. Meanwhile, the clones, the most loyal soldiers ever bred, finally get to break free of the role Palpatine wrote for them. Instead of executioners, they remain protectors, and that changes everything. And let us not forget Anakin, because that walking red flag is still dangling off the cliff of destiny. Without Order 66, does he still burn on Mustafar, or does Obi-Wan manage to reach him before the darkness swallows him whole? Maybe he still turns, maybe he does not, but you know one thing for sure. Palpatine would never stop whispering, never stop digging his claws in, never stop twisting that knife of fear and temptation. Watching that play out would be equal parts tragic and entertaining, like a galactic soap opera with lightsabers. The galaxy itself would be caught in this strange limbo, the Republic gasping for breath, while the Separatists cling to scraps of power. The Senate still cheers for Palpatine, citizens still crave stability, and corruption still rots everything from the inside out. Without the clean break of the Empire, the slow decay might drag on longer, uglier, and far more painful. Which makes you wonder, was the fall of the Republic always inevitable? Or was Order 66 the shortcut that got us there faster? In this video, we are going to tear into that question and explore every angle of a galaxy where the clones never executed Order 66. We will break down how the Jedi might have survived, how the clones could have changed history, and whether Palpatine still would have found a way to crown himself Emperor. We will dig into the hope, the tragedy, and the what-ifs that make this alternate timeline so fascinating. And by the end, you might realize the scariest part is not the betrayal that happened, but the possibilities that almost did. Imagine it for a second. The order is given. The chilling voice of Palpatine hisses across every clone's come. But instead of turning on the Jedi, the soldiers hesitate. What if Rex lowers his blaster, Cody waves off his men, and thousands of Jedi across the galaxy are never ambushed in those dark corridors? The whole history of Star Wars pivots in that single breath, and suddenly the entire galaxy is standing at a fork in the road. The Jedi would be alive, but what would they actually do with that survival? Would they confront Palpatine in the Senate chamber, dragging the truth of his Sith identity into the open? Or would they retreat, scatter across the stars, and try to piece together a resistance, without knowing if anyone would follow them? The sheer possibilities are endless, and that is where the fun begins. Think about Anakin too. Without clones marching into the temple at his side, does he still ignite his saber against the younglings? Does he hesitate when Obi-Wan confronts him, knowing the Jedi Order has not fallen around him? Or does Palpatine's manipulation still win, with Anakin choosing the darkness because of his obsession with saving Padma? The story could split in a dozen different directions, and none of them feel safe. Even the galaxy itself would be caught in suspense. The Senate still believes in Palpatine's emergency powers. The Separatist leaders are still scattered and hunted, and the war has not yet ended. Without Order 66, would the Republic stabilize, or would it tear itself apart from corruption and fear? The war might drag on far longer, and in that chaos, perhaps the Sith find another path to victory. This is the power of a single moment in Star Wars. Change one command, one act of betrayal, and you unravel everything we know. The Jedi survive, the clones remain loyal, and the Empire might never rise, or maybe it evolves in an even darker shape. Here is where the frustration kicks in. Because even if the clones stayed loyal, the Jedi were not exactly paragons of wisdom. They had grown so rigid, so bound by rules, that surviving Order 66 would not magically fix their blindness. Watching the Council deliberate sometimes felt like watching people argue over the thermostat while the house was burning down. Palpatine's schemes would not have vanished overnight. He still had the Senate wrapped around his finger. He still had the war machine churning on both sides. And he still had Anakin clutched tight in his manipulative grip. The Jedi could live, but they would still be playing catch-up against a villain who always seemed 10 moves ahead. That kind of imbalance makes you want to shake them and yell, "Do something different for once." The clones, freed from carrying out a massacre they never chose, still burdened with the knowledge of what they were designed to do. You can almost picture Rex staring at his helmet, wondering about the chip inside, wondering how close he came to murdering the Jedi he admired. That weight does not vanish, even if the order was never obeyed. the Jedi too would be haunted. Surviving does not erase the losses of the war, the friends buried on countless battlefields, the innocents lost as they became generals instead of guardians. They would carry the scars of years spent in armor instead of meditation. And many would never forgive themselves for how far they had strayed from their original purpose. Survival without healing is just another kind of death. And Anakin, if he still fell, if he still turned, the sorrow of watching him betray the Jedi while the clones remained loyal would cut even deeper. Because then it would not be about chips or orders or manipulation. It would be about choice. About a man who had everything in front of him and still chose the path that destroyed everything he loved. That is a grief that ripples across the galaxy. Even the Republic's citizens would suffer. Without Order 66, the war could drag on endlessly. More planets conscripted, more families shattered. Imagine entire systems trapped in stalemate, forced to send their sons and daughters to fight a war whose purpose nobody could even explain anymore. It would be survival, yes, but at what cost? The sorrow of this scenario is not in death, but in what survival truly means. Because sometimes living through something is just as painful as falling to it. Yet, for all the pain, there is awe in imagining the possibilities. A galaxy where Jedi still walk the halls of the temple, where masters and Padawans spar in training rooms instead of becoming names on a list of the fallen. That image alone sparks wonder, because it reminds us of what could have been. Picture Yoda leading the Jedi into the Senate, exposing Palpatine's Sith identity in front of thousands. Imagine Mace Windu alive, standing shoulder to shoulder with Obi-Wan and Anakin, rallying the Order to fight back, not as generals but as protectors. The sheer scale of that confrontation would be breathtaking. A true clash of ideals instead of just armies. Hope is the heartbeat of Star Wars, and in this scenario, it shines even brighter. The Jedi alive, the clones loyal, and Palpatine finally exposed, suddenly the galaxy has a chance to fight back with more than scraps and whispers. The rebellion would not have to wait decades. It could begin right there, with the Jedi leading the charge. Imagine younglings growing up, without fear of stormtroopers kicking down their doors. Picture Leia Organa, training openly with Jedi, instead of hiding her connection to the Force. Luke Skywalker might not even grow up on a desert farm, because his father could have been saved before Mustafar ever burned. Hope ripples outward in ways that change destinies. Even for the clones, hope would mean forging real lives. Freed from programming, they could settle, start families, and build futures beyond the battlefield. That simple possibility is more powerful than any blaster, because it gives meaning to their existence, beyond being soldiers bred for war. And hope is contagious. With Jedi still alive, entire systems might have resisted tyranny, refusing to hand over freedoms so isolated. The galaxy might have seen its darkest hours, but the promise of unity could have sparked earlier than in the timeline we know. That spark could ignite a fire much sooner. Because hope in Star Wars is never just about winning, it is about believing that change is possible, even in the darkest of timelines. And this alternate history gives us a glimpse of that belief made real. But here is the tragic truth. Even without Order 66, the Republic was already cracking under its own weight. The Jedi were blind to their flaws, the Senate was addicted to power and wealth, and Palpatine was still the master manipulator. The clones sparing their commanders may have delayed the fall, but it would not erase the rot at the core. Anakin's struggle with fear and control would not vanish either. If he still chose the darkness, then the survival of the Jedi would only make his betrayal cut deeper. Imagine him standing in the temple, striking down his brothers and sisters, not because of an order, but because of his own free will. That is a tragedy, greater than anything Palpatine could command. The Republic itself might have collapsed anyway, through endless war, political gridlock, or economic collapse. An empire could have risen not through a single speech, but through decades of erosion. Citizens trading liberty for safety, bit by bit, until democracy was only a memory. Sometimes the end does not come with blasters, but with silence. And yet, resolution comes in knowing that alternate histories force us to reflect. They make us ask, was it destiny, or was it choice? Could the Republic have been saved if just one moment had changed? Or was it always doomed by its own design? That is the power of Order 66. It is not just a plot twist. It is the mirror of a system collapsing under its own arrogance. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.